So these are your secondary math team coordinators. So we have Jackie Malone and Edgardo Carrion, and they handle the middle school math curriculum. And then there's me, and I handle everything high school. So anytime you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact information. And I'm always available to assist if I can. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go over the norms real quick. So essentially, I just would like you to be active participants. So please listen fully and reflectively, turn on your cameras, share your experiences, make your learning meaningful for yourself, support one another in the learning, and be responsible for your impact to the session. So in order to rename yourself, what you can do is look at the chat or at the participants list, and there's like 3 dots. Let's see. No, hover over your name, sorry, and then click more, and there's a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, you can rename yourself. So thank you, Fisher from Conrad and Samantha at Conrad. I see both of y'all are in the house. All right, so we have an opening activity. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to do it. It's not a big deal, but it is a logic kind of problem. So I don't know if you have ever done any of the New York Times games. This is a new one of theirs, or at least it's new to me. So essentially what you're trying to do is make words out of the letters that are on the perimeter of this square. There are a couple of constraints that you have, though. So number 1, you're finished when you've used all the letters. So if that takes you 3 words or 7 words or 10 words, whatever it takes, you can reuse letters, but you cannot use 2 consecutive letters on the same side of the square. So when I say 2 consecutive letters, I'm referring to the actual word that you make. So if I look at the word peace, P and I are consecutive letters in the word, so you can't make that word with this particular box. However, I've got lane. And lane, although there's 2 consecutive letters, they're not consecutive in the word. So we've got L up here, A down here, N, and then we return to E. So again, our objective is to use all the letters, just not 2 in a row on the same side. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to see how many words you can come up with. The reason why I gave you this activity is because I taught geometry for most of my teaching, geometry and AP Calculus. And we know that students have to develop those logical thinking skills. So this is one way to engage them in a non-invasive, like low entry point kind of way to get them to think logically. And logic is something that they need in life to be able to develop that skill and use that as they move forward in their life. Working within a set of predetermined rules, George. Great point. That's also very valid. All right, thank you for indulging me in that activity real quick. So these are our 3 core values for Dallas ISD. I know that you've seen these in other PDs that we've done. So number 1 is effective instruction. Number 2 is equitable access and outcomes. And number 3 is excellence. Our target is that 90% of our students will be on grade level based on absolute performance. 60% of students will be at meets and 30% will be at masters. It's our target. And hopefully with the high quality instructional materials that we've been rolling out, and as you guys that are implementing it in the classroom, we'll be able to refine that practice and bring more of our students closer to these targets. So this is our plan as a district. And the part that we're going to focus on tonight is down here, this instructional delivery and design. We have a comprehensive curriculum strategy, tiered resources. So Carnegie Learning is our curriculum provider for high school math, for everything Algebra 1 through Algebra 2. We want 100% of our general education classroom to be served by Tier 1 curriculum. We even further divided this down, our populations, our subpopulations. We have 49% emerging bilinguals, 21% comprehensive, 18 GT, and 12 SPED. But when we say we want everyone to get tier 1 instruction, we mean everyone. We don't mean just the gifted and talented or just the comprehensive. We want everyone to have access to this equitable material. So when we talk about tier 1 instruction, we're referring exclusively to Carnegie right now. So Carnegie and Mathia. Mathia is the online platform that Carnegie uses. Our tier 2 resources and tier 3 resources would be provided by Imagine Learning. So they have 2 platforms. You've probably seen both. MyPath is the tier 2, tier 3 remediation and instruction. And then Imagine Edgenuity is something new to our district. We're using it for CCMR or for TSIA and SAT prep. So those are tier 2 and 3 resources, but we want to, during class time, focus all of our efforts on tier 1 instruction. So these are some samples of what you'll see when we're talking about tier 1. I know that you've seen them as you've been working with the curriculum this semester. So we have our lessons, and they look similar to this. You'll see a lot of the same information. This particular document, though, is the Family and Caregiver Guide. I don't know if you're aware that we have those. Anybody know that we have Family and Caregiver Guides built into the curriculum? Was anyone aware of that? Yes, awesome. Have you been using them, Colin? No, oh, bummer. Well, if you have students that are struggling, send this home with them. Maybe they can get some support from their parents. You can also load them into Google Classroom. We have the skills practice and the assignment. So the difference between the two, there's a lot of confusion about it. The assignments correspond to every lesson. So every lesson has an assignment that goes with it. The skills practice is a bunch of naked problems, repetitive problems that you can give the students. It's normally 15 to 20 pages. I don't think I've seen one that's longer than 22 pages. The student version of it is not tagged by standard. But if you look at the teacher version is tagged by standard. So let's say that today the instruction is about 2A and you want to assign some extra practice to your students. You can go to the teacher-facing version of the skills practice and look for the 2A problems and then tell your students, I need you to work 1, 5, 7, and 9 because they correspond to the lesson that we did today. And then the fourth component is Mathia. And I know that there have been challenges with implementing Mathia. If you would like to connect with me, I have ideas to kind of how you can get that incorporated. But we're not going to focus a lot of time on that this evening. But Mathia is the digital platform that fills their learning gaps and gives them practice related to what they've been learning during the classroom lessons. So it's important to understand that Carnegie's teaching model and learning model is 60%, students receive 60% of their instruction in the teacher facilitated lessons and 40% of their instruction in Mathia. So all my math friends that are in here, that means if the students don't get Mathia, they're only getting a little bit more than 50% of their instruction. So we have to find ways to work the Mathia in. Again, connect with me outside of this training, and I will be happy to share some ideas with you on how you can get that incorporated into your classroom practices. So for this evening, this is our learning objective. We're learning to support the learner's experience for quarter 3. So what I would like for you to be able to do by the end is to describe how the engagement strategies and concrete learning experiences impact your student learning. All right, here's another document that you can scan. I'm going to grab this link for you real quick and drop it in the chat. This is the teacher resource page for this particular training. Everything that we're going to use this evening is on this page. So if you want to click on that link, or you can go back and you can use the bit.ly, scan the QR code any way that's convenient to you. These are the documents that we're going to take a look at tonight. Well, we won't take a look at all of them, but anything that's relevant, anything that you might need will be on this page. All right, so quarter 3 is coming up, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. And in algebra, we're going to be looking at investigating growth and decay. In geometry, we're going to look at investigating proportionality. And in algebra 2, we're going to look at developing structural similarities. So this training is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to talk about internalization, annotating your TIGs, anything like that. Excuse me. My goal in this training is to give you a couple of ideas on how to make it your own. So we've really driven home the idea that we want you to implement with fidelity. And that I want you to know that that doesn't mean that you have to go buy a script that's given you. Take the lessons and take the components of the lesson and turn them into something that works for you and works for your kids. So yes, we want you using Carnegie, but I'm going to show you some ideas, one for each of these content areas, to kind of show you how you can still use the Carnegie lessons, but make it a little bit more engaging, or structure it differently to where it's more visually appealing to your students, or it's not a slide deck from Carnegie, just things like that. So we're going to start with Algebra 1, and we're going to look at the data first. So when we look at the data, this is the spring EOC. I can't really make it bigger for you. I mean, I can, but I'll have to do this to do it. So I want you to see down here, the red are our does not meets. There are struggling points. The green, we're doing really great. And the blue, we're almost there. That's what these mean. So today we're going to look at 11B. And I chose 11B because it falls into the window of this upcoming instruction. Anytime I offer a training, I want it to be centered around things that are coming up. So we're going to look at 11B. 11B starts with Module 3, Topic 1, and it's Lesson 1. It's a generational thing. So I'm going to give you a second to read the introduction. This is from the Getting Started portion of this lesson. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Read that for me. All right. So it says on the screen, in your groups, create a family tree given the information I will provide. The reason why it says that is because I actually changed this so that it would be something that you could actually use in the classroom. So I'm not going to put you in groups, but I am going to kind of model what my idea is for the class. So initially what you would do is you would have students read the first paragraph. Jake adopted an English Mastiff puppy that he named Rickson. The breeder provided documentation. And so you can tell that we're going to look at Rickson's family tree. So here's, all right. So I'm going to ask you to create a family tree. Now, if you have a piece of scratch paper, please indulge me, because this is what we want our students to do, right? For your students, you could either have them do it digitally. You could print this out. I will warn you, you need another row for this activity. It just didn't fit in what I was doing, so I didn't put a third row. But if you decide that you want to do this the way that I'm modeling, just make sure you put another row down here for the next generation. But they could just do a tree chart with the names if they wanted to. So this is what I'm asking you to do this evening. Choose one of them and make a family tree. So we know that Rickson's father, which we call a sire, is named Cody, and his mother, which we call a dom, is named Bella. Just a disclaimer, the name or the word for the mother is dom. So I would be careful. You may want to leave that out in lessons, because I have actually had a couple of people pronounce it incorrectly and then kids get a laugh out of it. But sire and dom are what they're called, and their names are Cody and Bella. So in theory, what I'd like you to do is be filling this in. So you would put Cody and Bella in that first generation. So if I was in the classroom, I would actually be having my students do this. They're going to build this family tree, which if you've looked ahead and you've seen this lesson, they don't build the tree, it's given to them. So this is kind of a way to get your students to do that work. Cody's sire and dom. So remember, Cody is Rickson's father. Cody's sire and dom were named Rocky and Black Bella. And Bella's sire and dom were named Onyx and Isabella. So if we come back to our family tree, they would come down here. And then remember, we need this third line. So if you choose to use this resource that I'm going to show you, make sure you put that third line on there. So in the third line, we have this. Rocky's sire and dom were named Neil and Apricot Brandy. Onyx's sire and dom were named Blade and Rihanna. Then we have Black Bella's sire and dom, which were named Neodemus, and Princess Daisy. And then we have Isabella's sire and dom, which were named Moses and Lady Maggie. So if you have indulged me, this is what you should have. So we've got Rickson at the top, and then we've got Cody and Bella, his parents. We've got Rocky, Black Bella, Onyx, and Isabella as the grandparents. And then the great-grandparents, we've got all those third line at the bottom. All right, so how many parents does Rickson have? So Colin says that Rickson has 2. Great. How many grandparents does Rickson have? So the great thing about having your students build this family tree is that they can use that to answer these questions, which is why I wanted to give you this. How many great-grandparents does Rickson have? By now, you know where we're going with this. So he has 8. What pattern is there in the number of dogs in each generation? So that's kind of like the end thought. Maybe your kiddos will immediately, as they get finished drawing this family tree, maybe they'll already be able to visualize or conceptualize that pattern. Maybe they won't. Maybe we have to help them along a little bit, but that's kind of the rest of this getting started. And I believe it even goes into activity 1. So Mark says 2 to the n. All right. So activity 1 asks them to complete the column, the second column of the table. So the number of sires and doms. And you'll see I kind of hid it and then revealed it as I go through the slide deck, which is if you grab my slides, you'll be able to do the same thing. So you already told me that in generation 1, there were 2 sires and doms. Generation 2, there were 4. Generation 3, there were 8. Thinking as a student, they should be able to populate the rest of this. So then we get to 16. We can see, like our students should be able to see that it's doubling. So then it goes into an explanation of a power, a base, an exponent, kind of building in that vocabulary, and how to write a power as a product and kind of visualize that as repeated multiplication. So then the next part of the activity asks them to label the third and fourth column. So I know that I've got my math teachers here and y'all know how to do that. So I'm not going to push you through all of it, but essentially I revealed it slowly. And then at the very bottom, I undid all of them here. And then we have our third one. And this is when we're going to write it as a power. So expanded notation, we wrote it as repeated multiplication. And then when we went to the power column, we're writing it as a power. So who in the chat? So Mark said it was 2 to the n. And we can see very clearly that it is 2 to the n because n represents our generations here. This is second generation, 2 to the second gives us this 4. Generation 3, 2 to the third gives us 8. So yes, 2 to the n. So then how many dogs are in Rickson's lineage in the 12th generation? So it does say write your answers to power. So we've got that. We've got the power part. Okay, great. So now we've got the answer, 4,096. Isn't that incredible to think that Rickson's lineage has 4,000 ancestors in his past? And it's kind of mind-blowing to think of that in terms of our kiddos. Like that will be a mind blown for them. All right. How many total sires and doms are there in all 3 generations shown in Rick's lineage? So what I like about this is they've already built the family tree. They can literally go back and count them, right? We can come back to here and they can count them. Or they can use the page that they've already done. if they built it themselves. But they can also use the math that they're learning that's being built in here. So there are 14 sires and doms in the first 3 generations. We can count these by using our family tree or by adding the first 3 rows in our table. So when it says adding the first 3 rows in the table, it's talking about this. Or you could do 2 plus 2 squared plus 2 cubed. All right, so active learning and concrete experiences and engagement strategies. Active learning is an instructional approach that involves students doing things and thinking about the things they are doing, which is why I structured that particular activity where it required the students to do something. Having them build that family tree builds that content knowledge in, because as they're making that transition into the abstract representation of this function, they can tie that with the concrete experience that they just used when they built their family tree. So students engaged in active learning are often talking with each other, which is why I recommended them being in groups to create this family tree. They're developing skills rather than memorizing. They're using higher order thinking. Often they're doing something physical, or they're constructing knowledge or artifacts. So one more thing, I didn't create this, but another way that you could do this kind of to scaffold it would be to take the names and put them on like little cards, whether it be index cards, or you could create a slide deck that had them and have students like make it a drag and drop where they drag and drop it on a slide deck. You could also do that to scaffold it a bit for your students if you wanted to do that. All right, so that was my idea for Algebra 1. So geometry. Geometry, we're going to be looking at proportionality. So what does the data say about where we need to focus in geometry? So geometry looks like it's doing mostly good, but we do have a couple of pockets of difficulties that we need to take a look at. And the one I decided to focus on today was 4C. So 4C, you can find, remember this is geometry, we can find it in Module 3, Topic 1, Lesson 1, and it's called Big Little, Big Little. And again, I'm going to modify the getting started. I think with Algebra 2, I didn't use a getting started, I used something else. So I'm trying to give you different pieces that you can kind of make it your own and make it come alive in your own classroom. So again, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to read the paragraph. What is this lesson going to talk about? Drop it in the chat for me or come off of mute, either one. Scale factor, bingo. All right, so you're on the right track. This is going to talk about dilations. Thank you, Mark. So what happens when you have a puppet and you shine a flashlight against it onto like a white wall in the background? It's got to be kind of lights down, maybe not totally dark. But like you take a flashlight and I shine it on the side of my hand puppet. The closer the flashlight is to my hand, what is the correlation between that and the image on the wall? Can anyone tell? Or vice versa, the further away. Okay, so the silhouette, is the silhouette larger the closer I am to my hand? Like if I'm doing it right now and I'm holding the flashlight, is it bigger the closer I am or the further away I am? So the closer I am, it'll be bigger. And then the further away, it's going to get smaller. Why is that? The closer I am to the hand, why would it be bigger? So it's kind of a misnomer. It's not really that it's bigger. The closer the light is to the hand or to the puppet, the silhouette or the image that's projected on the wall is closer to the true size of the object, whether it be a puppet or a hand or whatever. The further away you get, conversely, it gets smaller. So this is what I did for this activity. I kind of made some instructions for them. They're going to work with a partner, create a shadow puppet. If you were at SILT training, you probably did this. If I have anybody in here that was at SILT training, because I actually asked your presenters to use an actual puppet and a flashlight to project it with. So you'll have your students. I have a template that I can share with you that I created of just a variety of different, mostly animals that they could use as shadow puppets. And then you'll probably need some popsicle sticks, but you can cut them out and send them home with your students and tell them to cut it and bring it back the next day or to the next class period. And then when they get there, they just stick it on a popsicle stick, and then y'all can play with flashlights and the shadow puppets that I made. And then you'll want them to practice going both ways, getting close to the puppet and getting away from the puppet. And so then after they have some time to play with that idea, we say, how does the size of the shadow puppet compare to the size of the object made out of poster board and craft sticks? So you've already told me the size of the shadow puppet is larger than the size of the object. How does the shadow of the puppet compare to the shape of the object made out of poster board and craft sticks, popsicle sticks, really? So the shape of the shadow is the same as the shape of the puppet, should be. And why do you think that the shadow is a transformation of the object? So these are questions that I would encourage your students to talk about in their groups as they're doing the shadow puppet activity. All right. I will show you, before you leave today, I will show you where I put these resources so that you'll have them to be able to use in your own classrooms. So the third content area that we're going to look at is Algebra 2. And in Algebra 2, you're developing structural similarities. Specifically, we're going to talk about polynomials. So when we look at the data, we can see that Algebra 2 7D is really, we're doing okay in it. These red ones I didn't select because they've already been taught by quarter 3. And again, I like to use something that is relevant to you. So 7D is coming up, and it actually kind of correlates or corresponds to an area that students historically struggle in. Anybody know what 7D is off the top of your head? Bonus points if you know. Factoring, and generally our students struggle with factoring. So this particular lesson is about factoring. Now, just a disclaimer, I showed you in the previous 2 contents, in Algebra 1 and in Geometry, ways to take those lessons and make them either hands-on or more engaging. The higher we get in math, the more abstract it is, and the fewer the opportunities we have to do something like that. But I did change this to where it is something that's a little bit more engaging for students. So I'm going to share that with you. So this comes straight from Carnegie. And I took this actually from their Talk the Talk for this lesson, Fracture It to Factor It. And this came from the end of the lesson. So it's like after they've learned these factoring methods, then they're going to come here and they're going to drag and drop these titles basically down here to methods. So they're going to look here, your students will look here, and they'll say what method works best for this particular polynomial. So I'm going to exit the full screen for a second to show you what I mean by that. If you decide to use this in your classroom, you can grab this and assign it to your students, and then they can make it the drag and drop that it should be. So essentially, they'll take these and they'll pull them down here to decide which method of factoring would be best. The goal of this particular activity is really to determine efficiency. So there's plenty of methods for students to factor, right? But not all methods are efficient in a given situation. So what I mean by that is, say this second trinomial right here. I would not do the quadratic method on that. There's no need to do that. I can factor that by finding the 2 binomials that multiply to give me the third term and add to give me the middle term. Like I would just do that. Down here on this one, I would factor out the GCF first. So we're trying to get them to think not only of the right answer or the right way to factor, but also about time saving and efficiency in the method that they choose to factor. And then what they do is they take these polynomials and they give the factored form here. So if you grab this and you use this in your classroom, when you assign this, they can type in here. So they can drag these and then put the method here. and they can type over here the factored form for you. Okay, so this is an extension I created. This is at the completion of the activity. Let's say that you have a group of students who nailed factoring, and you're still working with some students that are kind of struggling with it, and you want to keep them busy, but keep them on the same standard, right? So what you could do is you could give them this. Now, this doesn't come from Carnegie. None of these equations do. I made them up myself, tried to factor them, and they factored. So these do work. If you want to use just Carnegie problems, you can go to that skills worksheet, the skills practice, I believe it's called. I showed it to you in the very beginning of the training, and you could pull problems from there and switch them out for these. You could certainly do that if you want to. But essentially, as an extension, they would select 3 from this column, select 2 from this column, and 1 from this column. And you can kind of tell that I kind of made it spicy, medium, and not spicy, mild, I guess. So here's your mild set, and that's why they have to select 3. Here's your select 2. This is kind of medium, kind of, I'm not sure. Could be kind of a little bit more challenging. And then here's the select 1. This is your spicy. They kind of got to be pretty good at factoring our polynomials. Now, I had at a SILT meeting, somebody asked me about this one, the x to the 6th minus 4x squared. Why did I include this in there? And the reason why is because students don't recognize that as a difference of squares. However, if you factor out that GCF, then it becomes a difference of squares. So I kind of put it over here in the spicy. You could move it to the mild because it's not that hard, but it does take some thought for students sometimes. And then, of course, I have these up here that are factoring by grouping that are pretty challenging. So this is a great way to push those fast learners just a step further. This is where they would show that work. So they're going to drag or copy the polynomial from this slide. They're going to drag and copy it to this slide and put the polynomial here. How are they going to factor it out? So they're going to drag these. Why are they going to choose that method? It's important for them to verbalize or to write why they're going to choose that method, because it kind of, as they're talking through it, let's say we're looking at this one right here. And they say, oh, I'm going to do the quadratic method. And on the part where it says reason, they're struggling to find a reason. Well, why is quadratic method going to work best on this? And kind of having them think through that reasoning will make them realize, oh, maybe quadratic method isn't the most efficient method. Maybe I should look at factoring out the GCF first. So asking them their reasoning for selecting a particular method of factoring kind of prompts that thought process. And then again, they'll give you the factored form. Okay, so this is what I want to do now. We have about 20 minutes left in this session. I would like you to go, each one of you, to go to your course that you teach and look at an upcoming lesson in Q3, just one lesson, and find one of the components of the lesson like I did. In Algebra 1 and in Geometry, I used the Getting Started. And in Algebra 2, I used the Talk the Talk. Choose one of the components. It can be an activity. It can be the Talk the Talk. It can be the Getting Started, whatever you want. Choose one of those and think of a way that you can spin it and make it your own like I did with these. So I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to look at that because I want you to be able to go and scan that. And then think of your strategy, and then you're going to share that in the chat or come off of mute. Specifically, I'd like you to be thinking about how that strategy supports student learning. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Would you prefer to be in breakout rooms, or do you want to work individually? I like to give you choice in this. Sometimes having a thought partner helps though. So I'm happy to do that. Okay, got one for individual. Anybody else? Or I guess anybody that wants to work in a breakout, how about you tell me and I'll start a breakout. Otherwise, we'll just leave it individually. So it is 5:33. I'm going to give you to 5:40 to go look at that lesson and see about a strategy. And then we'll come back together and you'll share that out. All right, friends, be wrapping up your final thoughts. I need a couple of confident contributors. I need a couple of people to come off of mute and tell me about your course lesson strategy and how that supports your student learning, please. I have awesome wait time. Don't wait. You don't want to outwait me. Please, please. So you were tasked with looking at a lesson in your course load that you would be teaching in Q3 and coming up with a strategy to kind of tweak it the way I did, or make it your own, not the way I did, but make it your own, to support student learning. What did you come up with? Share, friends. Sharing is caring.
That was me. I don't, is this better with, okay, my sound was set way too high, I guess.
You sound perfect. Tell me what you got.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the, I'm looking at the Talk the Talk in the Algebra 1 Show What You Know lesson. And it's dealing with rules of exponents. And last year I had the kids make sort of little posters showing how to simplify radical expressions, and it looked awesome outside the room. So I'm thinking this is a natural to have them creating not only graphic organizers, but ones to actually try to teach someone else how to do that particular skill if they've never seen it before. Put everything into a poster that they would need to be able to learn how to do that skill. And the stuff that they come up with, just amazing, and beautiful to look at too. So we give them the full palette of colors and just see what they come up with. I think will be awesome on that one.
I love that, George. And I love celebrating the student creativity and ingenuity that they have. And I totally agree with you about them coming up with creative ways to work with mathematics. It made me think of something I saw today. So today I was walking a middle school, and the lesson that they were doing, please forgive me if I have anybody in middle school that's in the room right now, because I'm not a middle school person, but it was a middle school lesson and it was called the human number line. And the teachers had a number line for every student, a laminated number line, and the students were placing the points on the number line. But the person that I was walking with, Edgardo Carrion, who's one of our middle school coordinators, he was saying that when he did his SILT training, that he actually put a number line on the ground and had students physically walk to different numbers. And I thought that was genius. So love that. I love anytime that we can get our students moving. I love that. Piggybacking off of what you said, George, about the students making posters and things. When I was still in the classroom, I had my students do that all the time. I didn't make anchor charts. I had them make them because A, they're creative, B, they know what they need to see. So it's great to use your students in that way. And it also provides them with a learning experience. It's not just filling out a worksheet. So thank you. Anybody else have anything else they want to share? I want to honor your time, so I'm going to close out soon. But anybody else have an idea that they'd like to share? All right. So the goal of this session was for you to describe how engagement strategies and concrete learning experiences impact student learning. How did what I did with the 3 lessons that I looked at, how do you think that would impact student learning? If you did that in your own classroom, if you took the components of the lesson and kind of tweaked them and made them more engaging, how do you feel that that would support your student learning in your classroom?